G'day guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a review of a horror film from South America. We're going to Chile for this one, Spanish language English subs, released in the year 2012, directed by Patricio Valladares, and this movie is called Hidden in the Woods. Now, the story to Hidden in the Woods, it centers on a drug dealer who is working for a local crime boss in rural parts of Chile. He has two young daughters who are living in a cabin that is located very, very isolated, so no one else knows what's going on. Now, whenever this father gets drunk, he sexually assaults his young daughters and he beats them and he puts them through all kinds of humiliations. So straight away, you get an indication that this guy's a monster. So one evening, the father rapes the youngest girl, and as a result, the girl falls pregnant, and 9 months later, she gives birth to an inbred mutant son. Now, straight away, the father locks this son in a cage, and he feeds him raw meat. And as a result of this, he has the characteristics of an animal rather than a human, and he is a cannibal. So one night, the father gets in a little bit of trouble, and the crime boss wants to know where his merchandise is, because there's a lot of drugs on offer, and that the father is trying to tell the boss, but he can't do it right at this very moment. So one night, he actually gets arrested and thrown into jail. And this infuriates the crime boss. He wants his drugs, and he's not going to take no for an answer. So he gets his henchmen to basically go to this guy's house and get the drugs, and he believes that the two daughters know where these drugs are. So as a result of that, the henchmen get their hands on these daughters, and they torture them, humiliate them, rape them, in order to get them to tell them where the drugs are. So what happens from that point on, I'm not going to tell you, but whether or not the two girls survive this onslaught, that's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on the film. I had no idea what to expect with this one. It's 3.3 on IMDb, but that was really not a fair indication because it's only 92 votes. So anything under 1,000 votes I really don't take as a strong indication whether or not a film is good. But if you see the 3.3 rating on IMDb, I would highly recommend that you still check out the film and make up your own conclusion, because, as I said, with such little voting, it's not a fair gauge as to whether or not it's worthwhile to see. So South American cinema really making a name for themselves, especially Argentina. But Chile have made some good films, in particular Tony Manero. I thought that was a very good horror film and had a lot of depth. So coming into this one, I was expecting something shocking and something of an exploitation kind of film. But I wasn't prepared for just how shocking the film is. This movie comes across really as a hatred against humanity. There is no human decency in the film. All the women in the movie are treated like absolute trash. The men are preying upon them, and it really felt like a misogynistic kind of film. And if that's not your type of thing, you don't like it where women are seen as lesser beings and almost treated like animals, then this movie is not going to be for you, because it is extreme. There's a lot of rape, a lot of incest, a lot of child molestation, a lot of torture, humiliation, and it's just an incredibly depressing environment that the director has made. It is a low-budget film, but my good friend John, who did a review of this also, said that the low budget helped contribute to a very dirty atmosphere, and that's exactly what I felt. The low budget really helped it, and it gave it that sort of 70s exploitation feel, you know, of the more extreme films like Last House on the Left or I Spit on Your Grave. Those types of movies that don't have any human decency and have the balls to show you horror in its truest form, and violence for what it is. Deeply, deeply nasty stuff. So, you know, the father at the start of the movie, he's raping his children. It's just straight away you hate the father. You feel so sorry for these little girls because they're going through such hell, and you can't see any positive outcome for them. So when the father goes to jail, you kind of feel to yourself, well, maybe their life is going to get better. But no, it doesn't, because the henchmen are coming down upon them. So it's kind of like a very sadistic portrayal of women in some societies and how they're preyed upon and how they're treated. And it's very true, because areas in Africa or other places where rape is it's right. Everyone, treats women as dogs. And this movie really does that. So it's really hard to watch. If you're not a fan of extreme cinema, I would say stay away from it, because the rape scenes, although they're not very long, they are very hard-hitting. The violence is quite extreme. There is a hell of a lot of blood, and there is a lot of... it's really in your face. It's not overly graphic, but when it does hit you, there's a lot of blood, as I said, and it's all very deep and nasty stuff. My problems with the movie is that I felt that the shock value of the film kind of hid the fact that the movie was very disjointed, and on a technical level, it wasn't all that good. Now, some of the camera shots were very shaky, which I really didn't like, and I felt that the director kind of shied away from some of the violence, which kind of defeated the purpose that the movie had. The movie was showing you violence for what it is, but by shying away, it kind of gets up to the point where it's about to go that next step, push itself out of the boundaries, but then he kind of backs out a bit. So it kind of didn't go for what the film was all about, and what it was about is showing you something very nasty, whereas I thought it could have been a little bit nastier than it actually was. But having said that, do not take that as an easy watch, because it's more about what you don't see. It's about the hell that these children are put in that is the most disturbing. So as far as graphic violence is concerned, you'll see other films out there that are more graphic, but as far as psychological torment and sheer sadistic sort of pleasure from these scumbags, it's something that's going to hit you really, really hard, and it does distract you from the fact that the film isn't that well made. Now, it seemed very, very disjointed. Each scene didn't seem to continue on from the next in a very, smooth sort of fashion. It felt very, very jumpy, and it kind of felt like the scenes were made by themselves and just put together for an overall feature. So the continuity wasn't really there. I thought towards the start where they do, the insight into the family, it kind of cuts forward about 10 years each. So it kind of leaves a lot of the history out and a lot of the actual raising and hell out. And I felt that it was kind of a cheap sort of ploy. I would have much rather it be a slower kind of film and really gives you an insight and the build-up in a very hellish environment rather than cut forward 10 years at a time. But then, as I said, the cannibal child, it kind of gives you the insight when he was born, and then before you know it, it's when he was a teenager, and before you know it, it's when he's an older sort of guy. So it's that sort of time period that I thought could have been dragged out a little bit more, and it would have actually made the film more satisfying from a sadistic perspective. But having said that, the music was a little bit out of place here and there, but having said that, the movie does accomplish what it sets out to do. And what it sets out to do is shock you. And it is one of the most extreme films that I have seen in a very long time. And it's something I would not recommend to the average viewer because it really is pretty strong stuff. So as I said, it's the shocking value kind of distracts you from the fact that it's not a very well made film. They try hard to do something that I don't think they were quite capable of doing. But if you're a fan of exploitation films, especially from the 70s, where they don't really rely on solid filmmaking, it's just relying on the shock value, you're going to get a hell of a lot out of this one, and I would highly recommend it to you. But if you want something that is stylish, that is very well polished, and the cinematography being second to none, it's a film that might disappoint you. But as I said, it's just so shocking. The emotion is just such a high impact that you'll remember it for the fact that it is so shocking, and you do forget all the negative sort of qualities that the film has. So overall, I'm giving it 2.5 stars. Now 2.5 stars because, as I said, as a film itself, it's not great, but the fact that it's so shocking, it will stay with you. So I'm not prepared to say that this is a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. I am saying that it is a film I recommend to the most extreme horror fans, but if you're not an extreme fan, you're only a casual fan, this is definitely not for you because it will disturb you and it will, I would say, upset you as well. So very hard to watch, but if you can stomach it, it's well worth the experience. So that's my review of this Chilean horror film. Apparently, America are doing a remake, so watch the original before the remake because it'll probably be a lot cleaner, whereas this movie is very, very dirty stuff. It's very in your face and unapologetic. So anyway, that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.